Hey guys, this is Mr.Mariofan11. Welcome back, and today we're going to be doing a reaction video. Not only a reaction video, but me talking about the issues I have with Nintendo. Now, I did make a recording of this, but apparently I accidentally deleted by mistake, so I'm going to do this all over again. Now, again, this is going to be a reaction video of me reacting to top 10 Nintendo fails. And this video was made by Josh Scorcher with the help of Green Scorpion, which he's a great YouTuber who does other top 10 fails on the sideline too, like Microsoft, Sony, EA, Ubisoft, and stuff like that. You should get a chance to watch it, and I will again tell you on who made the video, and I'll try to put a link in the description after uploading it onto YouTube on where you can find the video. But not only that, but within the top 10 Nintendo fails, I'll be talking about the issues I have and what examples I have been having with it. So, without further ado, let's get started. 3, 2, 1.
In the 80s, the home video game industry in North America died due to a glut of terrible software produced by unauthorized publishers/developers, flooding the market and effectively turning many customers and retailers off of gaming. Anyone can make a game, no questions asked, and sell it to anyone. How could Nintendo succeed in a dead industry, let alone revitalize it and restore people's trust in it? Well, Nintendo's brilliant idea was this.
Don't let that little sticker fool you. We owe everything to it. Nintendo established a third-party licensing program that restricted how many games a publisher could release in a year. This meant that developers had to put their best foot forward or not at all.
Which is a problem for some.
NES cartridges having to be made through Nintendo itself. Sure, some tried to circumvent it, but that quickly proved too difficult. Nintendo made it far more profitable to make games with long-term goals rather than to make a quick buck. Though that didn't stop a lot of bad games from slipping through the cracks.
Trust me.
Yeah, every generation has that shovelware target. If you happen to be the most popular gaming platform, everyone's gonna try and make a quick buck off your popularity and highly protect you if you happen to be a pre-licensed property. And boy, howdy, did we get a smorgasbord of crap games for the NES. Yeah, game development was still new, but it seems so many people were able to coast on the popularity of the NES and other licensed properties.
Surprisingly, it does.
We never had anything like Custer's Revenge, so Nintendo's strategy worked, just
sorta.
not as well as everyone hoped.
Unfortunately, the sticker eventually came into controversy. The term seal of quality implies that the game is good,
and that there's no problem with
from
it.
Salty nerds claiming false advertisement. This is why you rented before you bought in the 90s, kids. Anyway, Nintendo quietly changed the seal to read Official Nintendo Licensed Product. So did that fix things?
Yes, but at the same time, no.
Fast forward a few years and oh man, there is a serious lack of quality control for the Wii. You know,
a lot of
the
shovelware.
limitation of how many games you can publish in a year on Nintendo consoles? Well, that doesn't really do much when you only need one game to make bank.
Have you ever heard of Sturgeon's Law? It states that anything and everything can be considered art.
True.
But 90% of that art is utter crap. As much as I love the Wii, it definitely started pushing the boundaries of that adage.
Seriously, finding a good third-party Wii game amongst the garbage was a chore. And this glut of kiddie shovelware really prevented a lot of publishers from taking the console as seriously as Nintendo themselves did. I still remember the GT Forum days where Wii is just a fad.
Don't even get us started on the handhelds. I can't tell you how many bad games based on movies or TV shows were released for the Game Boy Advance and DS. The worst part is that it's still going on today.
Which is bad,
the
too.
Nintendo eShop is filled with terrible ports of mobile games. But as much as we complain about this, to Nintendo's credit, they were able to reestablish some sort of standard. And again, this policy literally saved the industry. But there are days when we wish they were just a wee bit stricter.
This one is special because I did have some issues with shovelware games. Like he says, there are some shovelware games where Nintendo tried to make it take it seriously, they just cannot do that. They just cannot do it. But I experienced that with the Switch and the Wii U. When I look at the Switch, I look for some games where if I don't have like $60 on me, I'll just look for a game. Lucky for me, I don't have bad shovelware games. I do have some good games. Dragon Ball Fighter Z, Naruto, mainly mostly Nintendo, the Friday the 13 games. They're really good. But for the Wii U, I don't have any bad shovelware big games. But when I look down, I'm like, what are some of these games I never heard of? And they're like $1.50, $3.99, $5.99. And I don't really need to play the game. I can literally see the imagery of how the games are gonna look. And it's terrible. Even on the Switch, like he says, even ports of mobile games, they can't even do that. Now, thankfully, I don't have a problem with mobile games coming out on the consoles because there's a reason why there are mobile games and not console games. So trying to port them into a console, porting mobile games to the console games, what are you gonna get? Trust and believe me, you're not gonna get the same result you did when you play it on mobile.
Now, we all know that Nintendo is all about innovation, and sometimes
They're
we get
good.
really amazing
Some
stuff.
of them are good
And
innovations.
other times, we get some really weird shit. Sometimes both.
Now, there are so many embarrassing peripherals Nintendo has put out over the years that we could easily make a list dedicated to them alone. In fact...
Wait a second, where are you going with this?
Nintendo peripherals in 10 words or less. Only one game used this.
Never seen anyone use
Then
it.
vanished. Good. Could easily have used microtransaction.
Actually, here's the thing, and this is what they did again, like he said. When they first saw the sensor for the Wii, the Wii Vitality sensor, everyone was just not a big fan of it. But looking back, when they released some of the horror games for it, like the Resident Evil 4 game, they could have actually used that feature to like see your heart rate go up and see your heart pumping when certain things jump scare you or certain monsters or bosses you face within the game would have surprised you. It could have worked, but like you said, it got hyped and then got vanished. It was so-called hyped and then vanished real quick, even before it got released.
Only one game used this.
True.
Fire, fire, fire!
Overhyped Nintendo Zapper made immortal by Smash Brothers.
Fire, fire, fire!
Good game.
But not
I mean,
necessarily
good
made immortal
accessory.
by
Excuse
Smash
me.
Brothers.
It's so bad. Well, at least the marketing's honest.
The funny thing is about the glove, they even referenced it that in a show called Regular Show, which, for those who watch Regular Show, you had a great childhood with Cartoon Network. Adventure Time, Regular Show, surprisingly Ed, Edd n Eddy, and stuff like that. But what my favorite show would be Regular Show and Adventure Time at the time. And even Ben 10 too. But enough of that. This is Nintendo. The point where they actually even reference the Power Glove into Regular Show, how Mordecai and Rigby was trying to get the Power Glove, and when they did get the Power Glove, they literally were playing it, and they were not able to control it. They even tried using the buttons and everything. It just not work. It was so bad. Like you said, the marketing was good. So the advertisement was good, but the accessory was just bad.
It's Digimon Tamers, except you never have a full Digimon.
We just spent $90 on a weight scale.
Works
Congrats.
surprisingly.
And you thought the Genesis attachments were bad.
Pay us money for plastic!
That was
Pay us
dumb.
money for cardboard.
Surprisingly
So glad
worked.
Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles is getting a remake.
Used by a lot of games. No one used it.
Only one game used this.
Second generation a decade before it happened. With bad filters.
You only own this because you bought Link's crossbow training.
Used to make Pokemon fans happy for a bit.
You want to play DK64 and Majora's Mask?
With this history, the expansion pack, you do have to get it because for DK64 mainly, at the time, they were not able to let you play the game completely without getting the expansion pack with it. Now, thankfully, you can play with it-ish, but you're going to need the expansion pack in order for you to play, like you said, Donkey Kong 64 and Majora's Mask.
Useful at first. Died off later.
Incredibly niche.
Only one game used it.
Personally, I love this campaign.
No, never mind. Oh, excuse me, Alright, we're back.
Nintendo is a company that has had very strained relationships with third parties ever since the beginning. Even though the seal of quality policy helped revitalize the gaming industry, many third-party developers weren't happy with it. For some of them, only being able to release 5 games a year, as well as being forced to develop games exclusively for Nintendo, felt very limiting, both for their profit margins and, in some cases, their creativity.
True.
But Nintendo controlled over 90% of the market, so they really didn't have a choice.
But once Sega
True.
came along, oh lord,
They
got absolutely
used to not have a choice
Due to
until the
Sega's
console
aggressive
came in.
marketing, third parties could now develop what they wanted without having Daddy Nintendo looming over them. Sure, the number of games they could develop were limited, but they weren't forced under any exclusivity contracts.
They didn't have really
help that
strict
Nintendo
guidelines,
seemed to
actually.
enjoy actively antagonizing other companies.
We'll get to
got
that later.
investigated for antitrust violations. But possibly the saddest example of this comes from Square.
See, Square was with Nintendo from the beginning, with Final Fantasy being made for the NES. Since then, they made a lot of great games for the Super Nintendo, such as Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Super Mario RPG. They obviously had a close relationship with Nintendo, but then they had the idea for Final Fantasy VII. They realized that they literally could not make the game they wanted on a Nintendo console. Even if the fabled N64 DD was a success, Final Fantasy VII would have spanned 30 discs. Think of that the next time you whine about having to change discs. So they told Nintendo that they were going to develop Final Fantasy VII for Sony. And Nintendo's response was a very politically correct,
"No, get out of here and never come back!"
"Wow! Never thought Nintendo of all people would act like a jealous ex-girlfriend."
That just adds 15 layers of complexity to Cloud being in Smash.
I still told that years ago!
I see why they
And
did
if
it.
you think it ends there? Well, it got worse. Because the N64 went with cartridges instead of the cheaper and roomier discs, as well as the Sony PlayStation being the new kid on the block, ready
Cancel.
to have new
I'm
games
sorry.
developed for it with super strict
I have the
guidelines.
voice on, that's
Third
why.
parties gleefully snubbed Nintendo, and the effects of
Surprisingly.
this decision continued all throughout the GameCube's life cycle.
Which, then again, they did move on from cartridges to disc, but their disc was so small because they wanted to avoid piracy, it still hurt them at the very end.
Sure, they had some third-party support during all this, including from Sega, weirdly enough, but given the competition from the newly developed Xbox and how much the PlayStation 2 was dominating the market, sometimes it felt like Capcom supported Nintendo out of pity.
Then the Wii came along. At the start, nearly every third party took it as a joke, only pushing out games with the faintest fart of an effort. Even after the Wii's popularity exploded, that still didn't stop third parties from only using Nintendo to make a quick buck. And
Which is
only
sad.
so they take the Xbox 360, PC, and PlayStation 3 seriously. Things
Cancel.
didn't work at all with the Wii U, as the confusing interface and poor marketing caused initially
Excuse me for
strong third-party support to slowly fizzle out. Hi, Ubisoft.
Nowadays, things seem to have gotten a lot better. The Nintendo Switch has been nicknamed the portable port machine, as many companies can't seem to resist porting over their best games to the console. Hello, Undertale.
Good game, by the way.
Bethesda, of all companies, seems to be very intent on supporting the Switch. Seriously, we got Doom 2016 on a Nintendo console, the family-friendly company. And on that note, can we be reminded that Bayonetta 2 would not exist if it weren't for Nintendo bringing her aboard the Wii U all those years ago?
I want to talk about that too. Like you said, when they were developing Bayonetta 2, no one wanted to work with them. And that was until Nintendo, and I guess apart from Sega, also helping them. But mainly Nintendo, because here's how the conversation went down. So, you're developing Bayonetta 2? Yeah, but we have no one else to work with us. Tell you what, we, Nintendo, will help you make the game. But in return, we want you to make Bayonetta 2 exclusive for the Wii U. They say done, and boom, Bayonetta 2 came in. To the point where they even made a celebration on the Switch for both Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2. Which, by the way, you can play Bayonetta 1 on the Wii U too. They ported the same thing, which it was good too, surprisingly.
And given that Final Fantasy VII is being released on the Switch, I guess we can call that bygone bygone. That's how that word works, right?
Nintendo's relationship with third parties has been unbelievably rocky since day one. From smothering them with overly strict guidelines until they leave, to being unable to be taken seriously as a platform, to finally not being able to get enough of Nintendo, this whole situation might as well be a weird roundabout allegory about a controlling father who alienated his kids, then embarrassed himself in trying to get them back, but eventually ending on a happy note.
You know, I kind of want to see that now.
Like you said, those Nintendo guidelines they had from the very beginning, like around in 1983, 1980, like around the 1980s, they should have never had those strict guidelines in the very beginning. I know you want to work with the third party companies, but you're hurting yourself in the end because, like you said, when you limit some of the developers' creativity, you're also hurting the profit, which is the money. And that money is that lot of money that you're losing. Only you are actually feeling for this one, Nintendo, to the point where it's not really looking good on your end. Like I said, he had over strict guidelines to the point where the third party can want to leave. And when the Wii came out, no one is taking it seriously until after the result of it. And even with the Switch, they did great with it. Everyone wants to get on with Nintendo, which surprisingly was a good idea they did, too.
Nintendo is known for being a little behind the rest of the world when it comes to trends and avenues to explore.
You can say that
This
again.
led to them innovating in a lot of areas, and others they tend to make mistakes that people corrected years
Cancel.
ago. And nowhere is this more evident than how they view mobile gaming.
Oddly enough, fans have been begging for mobile Nintendo titles for a long time. But Iwata-sama, rest in peace,
Rest
was
in
very
peace, too.
adamant about not having Nintendo games be on mobile devices, stating if we did this, Nintendo would cease to be Nintendo. Dramatic wording aside, he did admit that Nintendo would make some great short-term games if they entered the mobile scene. He was right.
I don't think anyone was ready for how big Pokemon Go was going to be. Not even Nintendo. No disrespect to Niantic, but Nintendo basically funded this game with box tops and a prayer, and it shows. Gameplay depth of an Austrian royal's gene pool, frequent crashes, a near non-existent tutorial, and the worst sin for a Pokemon game? Absolute bare bones interactions with other players. No trading, no one-on-one battling, nothing. And, of course, what happened at Pokemon Go Fest.
Seriously, bless the speakers for trying, but that was not their day.
This was very bad for Nintendo's ending because Pokemon Go, like you said, bare minimum interaction with other players, frequent crashes and stuff like that. And with the Nintendo Pokemon Festival, it was not really their day. But here's the thing. They never add this part too, where people were dying because people were playing the game so much, where people were not really paying attention to their surroundings, to people getting hit by a bus or people getting shot at, or to the point there was a news on Fox 5 News where a kid died because of a train hit because the kid was playing Pokemon Go and he was not focusing whatsoever. That's not really good to a point where not only the game is having frequent crashes and bare minimum interaction with other players, but also killing your own customers for a game that does not really work, which is not good on Nintendo's end.
Taking the steps to make Pokemon Go the mobile monster it is today. And this would eventually lead them to develop other mobile games like Super Mario Run,
which surprisingly, the game, if you pay for the whole thing, is still $10. Seriously, I don't know why.
Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, Dr. Mario World, and
which, by the way, for Dr. Mario World, I'm sorry for pausing so much on this part. Dr. Mario World, you basically have to pay lots of money in order for you to get every single character, and that does not include duplicates either.
And Fire Emblem Heroes. And something tells me that what came next is what Iwata-sama was worried about.
Microtransactions are standard in mobile games, and it seems that not even Nintendo is immune to the insatiable sense of greed it creates.
Surprisingly.
Some examples of this are the Fire Emblem Heroes Pass and Fire Emblem Heroes, which offers some quality of life features for a monthly fee. Pokemon Pokemon Go sells cosmetics and boosts that you probably need for your Pokemon journey. And
Probably.
then there's Dr. Mario World, basically becoming Candy Crush Saga, where you spend real money on in-game currency to play a certain level.
But the worst of this came with Mario Kart Tour. Admittedly, the idea of playing a Mario Kart game on your phone was pretty enticing, and it received a significant amount of downloads on launch.
On paper.
Unfortunately, the gameplay was awkward no matter what device you played it on. The amount of content initially available was sparse, and that leads into the microtransactions, which were out of control.
I had money once. It was an overrated experience.
And we understand that the mobile market and microtransactions go together like macaroni and cheese at this point, but that does not change the fact that there's a proper way to do it.
Instead of making you pay over $1,000 just for certain things.
Hate mobile gaming.
When Nintendo strikes gold with a console, they really hit it home. The
And they do a good
NES,
job with it, too.
SNES, the blessed Switch. Even though the N64 had difficulty competing with Sony's PlayStation, we still got some of the greatest video games ever made on the thing, which defined many a childhood.
True.
The Wii as well. Yeah, a lot of the games are hit or miss, but the console itself delivered where it needed to. Just look at those sales numbers.
Naturally, for all the smooth, satisfying turns on Nintendo's never-ending console journey, there are more than a few bumps.
And
no
they're
lie,
very
Nintendo's
embarrassing.
bumps are pretty embarrassing. Case in point, the Virtual Boy.
Back when virtual reality and 3D was still a newish thing, Nintendo decided to give it a go with their own attempt at VR. Binoculars.
And it
Aside from
failed
aesthetics, the console's
badly.
main issue was that it barely even worked. It couldn't get the 3D effect right, and it was a major health hazard to anyone who even tried to use it. Headaches, nausea, neck issues. This thing was literally both an eyesore and a pain in the neck.
Fortunately, Nintendo isn't above admitting that this thing was a train wreck.
We don't joke about Virtual Boy. It's listening.
And not only that, but they're also not ashamed to actually reference it in some games. Case in point, the Animal Crossing and the Luigi Mansion. For Luigi's Mansion, they were referencing old consoles. From the original and the remake of the original of Luigi's Mansion, they represent the Game Boy, or what they call it, the Game Horror, which is a great idea. The Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon represent the DS, the bulky version of it, and not one of the DS Lite or DS XL, but it's their decision. And even with the new version of Luigi's Mansion 3, they represent the Virtual Boy, or the horror VR they call it in the game. They are not ashamed of admitting that it's bad, but are not ashamed of excluding it in certain games. And like I said, the Animal Crossing, they even represent that in the original Animal Crossing, where they have the Virtual Boy sitting in the corner and they even tell you how bad it is too.
Unfortunately, they're also not above poor marketing when it comes to other consoles. For a tragic fate hath befell the N64 Double D. It promised expanded game storage, online gaming, and even a creative outlet for artists and animators. That sounds too good to be true, right? Well, that's what Nintendo seemed to think, because only a small amount of these things were actually sold, and an even smaller amount of discs were made before they just got pushed aside and canceled altogether. They didn't seem to have any faith in this thing.
That seems to be Nintendo's main problem with these console failures. Either the console is actually beyond saving, or they just gave up halfway through trying to promote it. And it didn't stop there. Looking back, the Wii U isn't actually a bad console.
Perspective, I suppose.
But Nintendo did it dirty in the marketing department. Its console exclusive titles, if it had any, were slim to none. Third-party support was practically null and void, and then there was that abysmal launch. We'll get to that later. In the end, it only sold like 13% of what the original Wii sold and finally discontinued in 2017.
The gamepad's battery power also kinda sucked. Literally.
But
True.
hey, give it credit, it had more to offer than the Wii Mini.
What? What was wrong with that?
No backwards compatibility, no networking. You know what? I'll let Timmy finish my thought.
You know what's really microscopic? How much I care!
The last thing what they say about the Wii U is completely true. It's not a bad console, but the marketing of it made it turn into a so-called bad console, which it's not really good either. A bad console is a bad console if it fails what it's supposed to do. The marketing, you can mislead the marketing, but still make it a good console. But like he said, the console itself is not bad, but the marketing, what they did with it, make it terrible. And like he said, the battery life on the Game Boy, I mean, not the Game Boy, the Wii U gamepad sucks. Literally. I would charge it either overnight or I would charge it to the point where it's actually full health. I mean, full battery. An hour or two later, it's dead again. Or at least going to die. And they never even added this, or maybe it's just for me. I'll be literally, case in point right now, I'm on my bed right now. My console is not even too far away from me. I will pick up my Wii U gamepad so I can play some games that require me to play with my gamepad, and it will disconnect and say, I'm quote unquote too far from my console and I need to connect again. I don't hate the console, but some of those two issues are very bad. And again, not a bad console, but could do better than that. Now, does it make me hate the Wii U? No. None. Not. If they can just fix it, it's a good console. I had great memories with this. The first ever game I actually owned was Mario Kart 8. Then New Super Mario Bros. U. Then Super Mario 3D World. Then Smash Bros. Then Bayonetta and then Splatoon last. For physical games. Digital is a different story. I had great memories. That and the Xbox 360. But at the time, I had to get rid of my Xbox 360. But the Wii U and the 3DS what got me into Nintendo altogether. But these fails doesn't make me turn away from Nintendo completely, no. But they're very embarrassing.
An interesting fact about Sony and Microsoft is that both have been observed muttering jealous remarks about the staying power of Nintendo's franchises. All things considered, they have a point. Most of Nintendo's biggest franchises like Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon have been around for literal decades and are
for years. Actually, they've been there for years.
Keyword most.
So, what happens when you ask Nintendo to bring back some of their more neglected franchises?
Forget about it.
Reggie, give us Mother 3! How about this instead?
When you ask, you can forget about it.
But does Nintendo hate their niche franchises or something? Because if so, I have a few questions for Sakurai.
Yeah, it's almost like Nintendo wants us to forget about some of their old franchises to a seemingly hostile extent. You want a new Rhythm Heaven? How about Golden Sun? Advance Wars? Chibi Robo? Custom Robo? Well, guess what? It ain't happening, despite a vast amount of gamers hammering at Nintendo to get on that cash cow.
Seriously, Nintendo, you have a base of rabid fans that are begging to give you their money. Why don't you want our money? Shut up and take my money. I'm pretty sure this meme conjured itself into existence for you. Why don't you take that?
And it's really very true too. Nintendo really wants you to forget some of the other games they made. Rhythm Heaven, like you said, Chibi Robo, stuff like that. Even the F-Zero and Mother, they really want you to forget it. And when you ask them to make a remake or to continue with the franchise of them, guess what? That's not going to happen. It's not, unless you plead hard enough and basically annoy them, it's not going to happen. And it's very sad because when they return those series, it will get fans excited for it.
It's only a game.
Which you see
And when
in a few
Nintendo
minutes.
does release a game in these franchises, they often do so in a way that it feels like it belongs in the malicious compliance subreddit. Paper Mario Color Splash was a commercial failure.
And we're not going to talk about
Federation Force was met with
Sticker
throws
Star
and
either.
face palms. And how many Star Fox remakes do we really need? Seriously, all you have to do is use the same gameplay formula from 64, give it a few new improvements and features, and slap it onto a new narrative. That is practically what you do with all of your other franchises, and it works.
Surprisingly.
The reason we give Nintendo crap for this is that they themselves have proven that reviving a dying franchise can lead to some serious success. Donkey Kong Country Returns brought the Big 8 back into the spotlight.
They're
And
good.
there's Fire Emblem Awakening, which literally rekindled
Not a big
the
Fire Emblem
of the
fan, but
franchise
still a good
into
game.
global phenomenon. And don't even get me started on the mimetic zeitgeist known as Kid Icarus Uprising. I
Got
will
fans
bet that if
excited
they
for
announce
that.
a new game in the Mother or F-Zero franchise, the fan base will have no shortage of minds blown.
Thankfully, with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate celebrating the history of gaming, and the Nintendo Switch proving to be a revitalizing platform for some long-forgotten games, perhaps this issue will be addressed soon enough.
One
Here's
day.
hoping Metroid Prime 4 is good.
We'll be back too with another.
Song and dance again.
Alright, we're back.
E3, the most renowned gaming showcase in history, and the birthplace of many cringy, meme-worthy flops. And Nintendo has also had its share of triumphs and stinkers in this legendary land.
Surprisingly.
It's a conference.
E3 2010 was probably Nintendo's best E3 conference. Epic Mickey, GoldenEye, Donkey Kong, and the 3DS with Ocarina of Time, Kingdom Hearts, and Kid Icarus. Though, it didn't start out too great. Skyward Sword unfortunately had some interference, and it was a painful 10 minutes. Luckily, journalists got to demo it themselves and assured everyone that it not only works, but works well. But for a while, we were really scared.
E3 2015 was...
And another thing about that, when they try to release Skyward Sword, they released it on the GameCube, and then they had to redo it all over again for the Wii. Surprisingly.
was another case of good and terrible. While featuring a lot of great 3DS games and some hilarious puppetry, this direct was considered the nail in the coffin for the Wii U. The Wii U was starved for big games for a long time. What we got to look forward to was Mario Tennis Ultra Smash and Star Fox Zero. Oof.
Surprisingly, it could have done better.
Then there was E3 2011, where the Wii U's initial trailer was confusing, to say the least. No one knew what to think of it, especially because it didn't explain the gamepad's capabilities and limitations all that well. I'm pretty
Cancel.
sure was the
They
intended
tried.
selling
They
point
really
for the
did.
thing.
But then there's the big one. Quite possibly one of the worst E3 press conferences of all time, E3 2008. During this time, the Wii was doing well. Very well. But with the slow decline of E3 quality since 2006, a lot of very loyal audiences had felt like they were being ignored in favor of the new casual market. With a sparse showing from the third parties and only Twilight Princess and Mario Galaxy under their belt, the more optimistic fans thought that Nintendo was saving their best stuff for E3. Beforehand, Reggie said that there were going to be 3 game announcements that hardcore gamers would be very interested in. What we expected was maybe F-Zero, Star Fox, an Okami sequel, or heck, everyone was talking about Kid Icarus. So what were the 3 hardcore games they were talking about? Star Wars: The Clone Wars, Rayman Raven Rabbids TV Party, and Call of Duty World at War. Oh yeah, because these totally have the same audience.
Yeah.
Oh, it gets worse. I remember when the Wii Fit board came out, people said it would work great with a snowboarding game. Well, they gave us one at the beginning of this conference, but by this point, interest in such a concept had evaporated. You should have led with that once you released the thing. Then there was the Wii Motion Plus, which was announced to a deafening silence. Why? Well, because this is them charging you an extra $20 so they could deliver on the one-to-one motion control they promised back in 2006.
And they wouldn't. And you really want real silence? What about the Wii Vitality system? It was very silent.
Sure, we got a fun Wii Sports Resort demo with the jet skis.
Good
but
game,
before
still.
that, we spent so much time on throwing a frisbee to a dog. Safe to say, we felt a little patronized.
And dragged.
Is that the most adorable game you've ever seen?
And there wasn't much else at the conference that people really cared about. An
Surprisingly.
underwhelming Animal Crossing sequel, a Guitar Hero game for the DS, and over 20 minutes of bragging about how much money and success they had, and paylaying it up with their life stories. It was amazingly boring.
Yeah, no one
Nearly an
cared.
hour of
No
conferencing
offense.
and only 4 new games announced, few of which people were actually interested in. And then, wait, lights, smoke rising, and build up. Could this be Kid Icarus?
Nope.
Wii Music.
And you want to know what the funny thing about Wii Music too? It failed. Badly.
As Nintendo fans saw their awkward, out-of-touch words fail to drum properly and butcher the Super Mario Brothers theme, it really began to sink in that dark days were ahead. It was a sad time to be a Nintendo fan, as many truly felt like Nintendo had sold out to the soccer moms and abandoned the ones who got them where they are today. Nintendo lost a lot of their fan base's goodwill with this, and their reputation wouldn't really recover until the end of their kinda mediocre 2009 conference. Yeah, it eventually turned out to be a bad game, but looking back, pretty much everyone forgave Nintendo once that trailer for Other M dropped.
Oh, guess what, Scorpio B? Did you hear about these computer mods? They can operate in color, and they can branch out to folks all around the world conveniently. I will not get you.
Oh, I have something to say.
Standard technology. Why doesn't Nintendo get on board with that?
Real quick, guys, I have really got something to say about this one. But I'll say that until the end of it. But there's an ad coming in, so I'll be right back. Alright, go back.
Even though time waits for no one, Nintendo's got a tendency to fall behind when it comes to online services. Right off the bat, online netcoding with Nintendo is a nightmare!
True.
The only games with decent online gameplay are Mario Kart and Pokemon. Sorta.
Yeah, I actually hate the fact that you have to buy a separate piece of hardware just to play Smash Ultimate properly online. And even then, the sheer amount of frame delays makes Marvel vs. Capcom 3's online look good.
And then there's Splatoon. Not only is there no TeamSpeak making communicating with your squad impossible, but it also had a punishment system set up for players who left matches early. Not a bad idea in theory, but the online netcode was so bad that disconnections were common, and anyone who had an accidental disconnect got hit with the ban button almost instantly.
And that's
What's
very
that?
bad.
You want to play with your friends? No problem. All you need to do is enter your inconveniently long friend code and send
Why?
it to your buddies elsewhere.
Other consoles
It's
don't
not
do
like
that.
Other platforms like Steam have a friend request button that saves you all that trouble. Oh, wait.
And I want to briefly touch upon the DLC real quick because Nintendo has an equal amount of awesome and terrible DLC.
Getting to play them
Playing
is a different.
matter. We will say this, however. They have grown a lot in terms of online shopping. Starting from the Wii Shop with WiiWare. WiiWare.
No one's gonna forget that.
You could download games straight to your console without having to step a foot out the door. And would only continue to grow until we reached our most recent innovation, the Switch Online Shop and the Nintendo eShop.
However, this only raises new problems. The online shops still have a few design flaws that make them a bit more inconvenient than they need to be, particularly the verification systems. Plus, I've noticed that Nintendo has been going a bit ham with the online subscriptions. Now, I'm not necessarily against paying an annual fee for online features. It is
I
a
am.
service after all. But now Pokemon Home requires a subscription, and it's not quite overboard yet. The pricing for these services is okay, but it's getting a little worrisome.
And therein lies the problem. They'll force you to be online and then not put their best foot forward to make sure you can enjoy the experience. There's so many great online communities just waiting to get tapped into, and Nintendo has no idea how to work with them. Why did console gaming get so exhausting?
I did say I had something very big about online connection with Nintendo. I experienced this so much on my Switch to the point where it's very bad. Here's the story. I will be playing Smash Bros. Online with my friends, Nightmare and other people, but we will have full bars of our internet connection. We will go and play, we will have fun and all that stuff. Then in a match, somehow, surprise, it will just start disconnecting, and then it kicks us all out. Even the person who make the party. And like you said with Splatoon, where even if you play the game, there will be a problem where if you disconnect, you'll be kicked out. And for some people, they will be banned. That's very bad when you have a game that requires online, like Splatoon, and you can't even play the game because online is your enemy. And they even have an accessory where you connect a LAN adapter to your Wi-Fi, and even then, you will still have problems with it. And here's the thing about it. I wish they never made this. I hate to say this. I think the Nintendo Online membership thing is stupid. They never did it before, and they should have never made it now. Now, you saw the prices of how much it is. They even made the expansion pack now, and they are ridiculous. If you buy the online membership for a year, you're spending $12.99. Well, $20. I think $20. But if you buy the expansion pack, you're basically either getting a family pack or you're getting the 12 one. And you're about to spend over $80 for it. So add that together, you're spending $100 for online. Now, granted, they do have NES, SNES, N64 online membership, and even the Genesis. But come on, seriously, if I want to play older consoles, I either have the games already there that they keep remaking over and over again, or I'm just gonna emulate them. Like that serious. Why would I pay basically $100 just to play older consoles that may or may not work, and deal with the online that may or may not work, where I can just buy the games or emulate them on my computer or PC? Would you do the same if you have the same problem as me?
If you've been creating content for YouTube for, I don't know, like 10, 5, 2 years, then you're probably familiar with that.
Uploading any kind of content involving an existing IP is pretty much impossible to do without upsetting some copyright holder every now and then. And for a while, Nintendo was one of the biggest crybabies. They were absolutely ravenous when it came to takedowns back in the day. And even
Thankfully,
though they relaxed a little in recent times, people still live in fear of Nintendo's laser-guided takedowns. Though, to be fair, some people had it coming.
now I really want to talk about this because I did get like copyrighted for music, mostly because some of the music is not originally mine, and I would say like this music is not mine, it's owned by this, that, and that, and I'll get copyrighted and stuff like that. Only 3 of my videos got copyrighted in the past, and I mean far in the past, around like 2019, I believe, 2019. It would be like for the bowling alley one, 2 bowling alley ones, and I got copyrighted for the music that was playing in the speaker because I didn't tell in my video that this music is not mine. It's not originally mine. It belonged to Rick Irish or something like that. Just an example. I don't know. Thankfully, I never get copyright strike from Nintendo at all, and I'm finger crossed I don't get one in the future. But it's very bad for people who show love and care for Nintendo instead of using it.
But that doesn't excuse taking a dump on the fans who do these things out of love for the company.
Because
See?
it's not like people making videos about your games can easily be a form of free promotion or anything. Now, Nintendo has definitely turned down the heat these days, but the Nintendo Creators Program requires you to share a portion of your ad revenue with them, so it's not 100% perfect. Of course, YouTubers get off easy compared to the fan games.
Just about every Nintendo fan game developer lives in constant anxiety that one day they'll be the next one to receive the dreaded cease and desist. We've seen a ridiculous number of incredibly interesting looking games be yanked off the internet by them, usually before the game can even come out.
Ocarina of Time 2D.
I'm just gonna ignore all of this because it's basically them going up the lineup of fan developed Nintendo consoles. So we'll be right back.
About all of this,
We're
is that
back.
other game publishers have adapted to the times when it comes to fan creations. Namco
True.
commissioned a fan artist to promote Tales of Berserk.
Sorry about that.
Capcom promoted a Mega Man fan game, and Sega brought on fan developers to create Sonic Mania,
Which the game is good. And that's the thing about Nintendo, which I hate about this. And this happens again with their innovations and problems they shouldn't even have in the beginning. With them actually getting along with the trend, with especially with fan developers working side by side, instead of turning them down, which they're not doing it just so they can get a job. They're doing it out of love and respect for the company. And they're getting, like he says, cease and desist from them. Basically deleted and basically cut off altogether. And like he said, Sega had fan developers working for Sonic Mania, and the game was gorgeous. Now, I can't say anything about Sonic Forces because you can literally beat the game in 30 minutes, and that's not no joke. I literally beaten the game. You can literally see my entire gameplay of it, and I only did 5 parts of it, including I think episode Shadow too.
quickly became one of Sonic's most beloved games.
Meanwhile, Nintendo actively refuses to adapt to the times. It's a real shame because when they do try a modern trend, they do create some good things. All the
True.
great and mostly free DLC and updates for Hyrule Warriors. Heck, Splatoon is technically Nintendo's online shooter. They can succeed, so it makes it a little more annoying when they blunder.
On the flip side, though, Cadence of Hyrule is a small step in the right direction regarding fan support, not to mention Sans and Cuphead appearing in Smash Brothers.
As
Hopefully
Mii
there's a
fighters.
sign of better things to come, but I'm not holding my breath.
Now we got the honorable mentions, and then we're gonna go straight to number 1.
Shortages of Wii, classics, and amiibos. Technically, a shortage is a good problem sometimes, but it does raise suspicion.
I actually want to talk about that too. And hold on real quick. I actually really want to talk about this because shortage, like you said, is not bad, but it does raise suspicious. And here's the thing. And this is not indie Nintendo fail. This is them making a mistake. Because back in the day, during 2020, which we should all forget, they actually released a game where they were actually releasing 3 great games from 3 great consoles. And it was none other than the Super Mario 3D All-Stars. I told you the story of how I got in the game during 2020, after they were quote unquote getting rid of, and I ended up getting it in April of my birthday. We already got in the game, and even then, after my birthday, there was still more copies of it, and they were going to get rid of this in March 31st, both digitally and physical. And I ended up getting the game after they were so-called getting rid of it. I don't see no point of them doing that if they're not going to make amend of what they so-called promise. Really?
To play Control, trying to mix the old school GameCube controls with the newer Wii Remote controls is gonna get confusing fast.
Not saving Rare. They knew not the terrors they allowed with their ignorance. They knew not.
That themselves, it's a problem on its own.
Accidentally banning Peach players in Smash Brothers. They did apologize for this one, but it's kind of scary how using a certain move can get you banned for an entire day.
We're gonna skip this one. I'm sorry.
Fails we've
Alright, we're back.
This list so far have consisted of relatively recent blunders from Nintendo, and some of them have thankfully led to Nintendo learning from their mistakes. However, in order to find their greatest folly, we must journey far into the past, nearly 30 years ago.
Is this an obvious number 1? Nintendo wanted to create an add-on for the Super Nintendo that would allow it to play games from the far more powerful CDs. For reference, an SNES cartridge could hold about 4 megabytes. A CD could hold around 700. So, to make this a reality, Nintendo struck a deal with Sony and would call it the Nintendo PlayStation.
I would pay money to see that alternate timeline.
Me too.
Fast forward to 1991 at the Consumer Electronics Show, where Sony had already told the world that they were working with Nintendo. At their conference, Nintendo was expected to reveal the result of their collaboration with Sony to the gaming public. Instead, they revealed that they were canceling their deal with Sony and that the add-on was being developed by Philips.
As for why this happened, it's a bit complex. To try and summarize while still getting all the nuances, Nintendo didn't like that Sony had the ability to make and sell games without buying them from the former. There are also some indications within the contract that Sony intended to eventually assimilate Nintendo, and Sony would also gain the rights to properties such as Mario and Zelda. So, rather than try and renegotiate the nature of the deal with Sony, Nintendo decided to ruthlessly crush them. They straight up, right behind their backs, struck a deal with Philips instead, and basically took all the ideas and assets for this shiny new console and left Sony out to dry, all the while publicly humiliating them in front of the entire world.
Now that's bad on its own.
Nintendo.
And they got a
Sony now
bad
had
karma
nothing but
for
an
it, too.
unfinished console. But instead of wallowing in their own self-pity, Sony tightened up their bootstraps and got to work. They took the concepts and the ideas that they got from working with Nintendo and eventually developed their own CD-based console. This would eventually become the Sony PlayStation.
And what did Nintendo have to show for stabbing Sony in the back?
Gee, it sure is boring around here. I hope she made lots of spaghetti.
I wonder
Ooh.
what's for dinner.
When you pitch Wendy's pennies, they pitch back.
Or else you will die.
All toasters toast toast.
Let's just say,
All the floors in Hyrule
was working with
can
Philips
be
a great idea?
Because of of Nintendo's short-sightedness, one of the most powerful and lucrative names in the game industry was born, and bringing with it some of the most popular franchises. And because of Sony's less strict policies, beefier hardware, older demographic, and space-friendly CD formats seeming more appealing to third parties, the PlayStation absolutely crushed the N64. Meanwhile, the Philips CDI would go down in history as one of the worst consoles ever created.
Right. That didn't work.
Was
Now,
it worth
don't get
it?
us wrong. The
Nope.
PlayStation itself is amazing. After all, it's home to some of our favorite games of all time. The fail here is that Nintendo ended up creating its greatest rival after Sega had shot themselves in the foot multiple times. Although,
boy.
when you really think about it, this astronomical blunder might have ended up benefiting the gaming industry in the long run.
Nintendo's
Surprisingly.
cutthroat ruthlessness in their early life inadvertently created competition for themselves, causing both these companies to make greater strides to win fans. Not only did Sony thrive from this, but it also gave Microsoft the incentive to enter the industry too.
Later
Nintendo
on,
was no
yeah.
longer the dominant player in the game, and at the time, that was a good thing.
It truly says a lot when, in the end, Nintendo's greatest failure ended up being one of the most wonderful things to ever happen to the gaming industry. Huh. This countdown ended on a good note.
Well, that's basically the video of it. Like they say, the fail themselves, including the number one, are very bad. Well, are not really the greatest decision they did in their end. And at the number one, like he said, in the end, it not only became the worst decision Nintendo made in their entire life, it also became the greatest decision they actually made too for other gaming histories. Now that Nintendo was not the only console outside of Sega, because back in the day, even with my mother, when we talk about video games, they remember Nintendo because that will be the first thing they did. That was the first ever console they had on the market before other consoles. So the mistake they did with the number one ended up being a good thing for other consoles. Sony, Microsoft, Sega at the time, before they stopped making consoles. But it was still good. So the question you probably asking me is, does that deter me from no longer being a Nintendo fan? Absolutely not. I still love Nintendo with all of my heart. All their games, all their consoles they did good. They are fantastic. Even with their boo-boos and mistakes they made in the past, they eventually fix some of them. And I'll still support them to the very end. Again, I have ideas for Nintendo when I want to work with them when I grow up. So, no, it doesn't deter me from no longer being a Nintendo fan. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and comment, subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification so you guys will be notified when I do gameplays, reactions, and other stuff. In the next video, we will be doing a little gameplay of Dragon Ball Z The Breakers. And then after that, we'll be continuing with Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 after that. See you all. Have a good day. Peace from Mr.Mariofan11, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.